welcome everyone back to another episode of The Agent Investor. I'm your host, Brandon Rush. Thank you for joining us. The goal of the Agent Investor series is to educate investors and help them in making informed decisions in commercial and multifamily and other investment assets by having conversations with other real estate professionals in the field. So today we have Jake Schiro from APX1031 joining us to discuss 1031s. Thank you so much for joining us, Jake.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I met Jake. I think he connected with me on a listing that I had and asked about potential 1031 clients, and we connected from there. So it's great that we connected. And we're just going to start with Jake. Tell us a little bit about yourself. And obviously, we know how you are, but how you're involved in real estate and how you got to where you are.
I'm involved in real estate. I handle 1031 exchange transactions. Been doing that about 4 years now. I got a start in real estate doing multifamily brokerage for a handful of years there, and also worked for a company. My actual intro to real estate, I worked for homes.com, which is now actually been acquired by CoStar. But yeah, I've been in real estate for the last 8 or so years.
Nice, very nice. Cool. All right, so we're just going to dive right into it. The very first question, what is a 1031, and can you break it down for those who are not familiar with 1031s?
It's a great question. We get that a lot. In a 1031 exchange, it's a very good tax strategy. It allows an investor to sell an investment property. Now, that's the key. It has to be an investment property. It has to be held for investment. But they can sell an investment property, use the proceeds of that sale to then subsequently buy another investment property and defer the capital gains taxes or the profits that they made on that sale. But in order for that to work, they need to reinvest all of the proceeds. They need to buy a replacement property of equal or greater value to what they sell. And then they also have to have a third-party intermediary, such as our company or a company similar to ours, that actually facilitates that transaction.
Got it. Easy enough. So one thing you touched on, you said it has to be an investment property. So someone occupying a property, they cannot 1031 a personal residence.
Correct. They cannot do a 1031 with a primary residence. Also, if it's a second home, that's an area where they wouldn't be able to necessarily do a 1031. But there are ways to eventually convert that into whether it be an investment or a primary, because there's other tax benefits for a primary residence as well. So there's different sides to those things, but each has its own benefit there.
Got it. So is it a rule that they must reinvest all the proceeds, or can they basically reinvest most of it and pay tax on whatever's left over, if that's the case?
Correct. Yeah, so for a full tax deferral, to be clear, they can take money from the sale. So like if at closing they determine they want to take a little bit of the money out and use it for something else, that's fine. It's just going to be subject to tax. We have a form in our documents that would indicate X amount will go to the client, and then the rest and the remaining of the proceeds will come to us for the 1031 exchange.
Got it. I'll have more questions as I hear you speak more in the 1031 process, but next question is regarding the process. We don't have to go into super granular detail, but from a high level, from beginning to end, what would it look like for someone to undergo a 1031? And I'll give you an example. I'm an investor selling out of West Hartford, Connecticut. I have a building that we don't have to go in specific numbers, but basically if I owned it for the last 10 years and have a big gain on it, say $500,000 or $1 million, and I want to reinvest it into Florida, what would that process look like from me working with you guys and selling and all that?
Sure. The sale would be the same as normal. So it's listed on the market. You go through the normal steps, receive offers, review offers, do all that. By the time it goes into contract is when you're going to want to involve the accommodator. We'll get involved and we'll handle the paperwork for that transaction for the exchange piece of it. And the sale proceeds as normal. So you go through all the due diligence, everything, get to the point of closing. The difference is at the point of closing, instead of the proceeds going to the investor, the proceeds will come to us, and we hold the money between the two transactions.
Got it.
And the reason being is that the investor, if they touch that money, if it goes to them, that's a taxable event. It's why you want to get your qualified intermediary involved early, because if they close, they receive the money and then decide they want to do a 1031 exchange, it's too late. They've now had a taxable event and they're going to owe the taxes for that sale. So it's critical to get the 1031 involved early, and then we hold the proceeds, and then it's the same deal on the purchase. So it would be a normal real estate transaction. You go shopping for properties. So if in this scenario you're looking in Florida, you start making offers. You want to make offers early and often in the process. You can have your replacement property in contract prior to closing on the sale. You just need to make sure the purchase takes place after the closing of the sale for that exchange to work. But it would be the same situation. They'd make offer, they get an accepted offer that's moving along. They'd get us involved. We do the paperwork to legitimize the exchange on that end so that we have all that in place. We can send the earnest money deposit from the exchange account.
Okay.
And then as it progresses towards closing, we get the estimated closing statement, and then we'll send the remaining funds to the purchase for the closing of the purchase. So we would facilitate all of that. If there's a loan in place, they would still do their regular loan, go through the process of getting approved for the loan, all that. But as far as the down payment that's coming from the exchange, we would be the ones sending that for the closing.
Got it. Okay. And a couple of questions in that process. When should someone engage with you in terms of, they know they're going to sell, like when do they call you and say, hey, Jake, I think we're going to sell, or we are selling?
Anytime is fine. It's good to call ahead of time because sometimes there's scenarios you'll come across. It's really going to depend on the situation. With the exchange, the best way to do it is as much advanced planning as you can. So talking to the qualified intermediary, maybe even before listing the property, is good practice to understand what's going on. Because if there's a situation where maybe it's multiple parties involved, it's an LLC, or there's tenants in common, there's multiple owners, and maybe they want to go different directions and each do their own thing upon the sale there. Those are things that you need to plan ahead for. So that's something that would be worthwhile. In terms of the actual exchange itself and engaging us on getting the paperwork and getting the ball rolling to open the account, once it's in contract, that's usually a good time to get us involved from that end. But it's good to have conversations with the qualified intermediary early. And also, if they're planning on doing exchange, they want to be talking to their CPA, tax attorney, whoever their tax advisor is. For specifics. We, as a qualified intermediary, we don't give tax or legal advice. We can't. We're a neutral third party that facilitates the transaction.
Got it. No, absolutely. Good. They had the term of identifying a property. What does that mean to identify a property in the 1031 process?
So the 1031 is one thing that's limited. That's one thing about the qualified intermediary holds accountable timelines for the 1031. So 1031, it's not an open-ended thing where they sell it, we sit on the money, and then they just have as long as they want to go buy a property. There are very specific timelines that need to be followed for it to be a viable 1031 exchange.
Okay.
You have a 180-day exchange period. So from the date the sale closes, they have 180 days to complete their exchange. But to answer your question about identifying, within the first 45, they need to figure out what their replacement property or properties will be. Okay. They have 45 days to identify, and we have a form. It's an identification form. They need to have it submitted to us in writing with their identifications of their replacement properties. And on the identification form, there's 3 different rules for identifying properties in the 1031. The one you're going to see the most, it's called the 3 property rule, where they can identify up to 3 properties. It doesn't have to be 3, but if they want, they can identify up to 3 properties. And there's no cap on values or anything like that. They can identify 3 properties. One could be worth $10 million, one could be worth $50,000, but they're capped at 3 properties.
Got it.
The second rule, it's the 200% rule, which allows them to identify as many properties as will be allowed, up to 200% of the fair market value, or basically of the sale price of that. So if they sell for $1 million, they can identify more than 3 properties, but they can't identify more than $2 million worth of property. And usually the list price is a good rule of thumb to use when they're identifying that.
Got it.
The third rule doesn't get used. It's more of a special purpose type rule. It doesn't get used often, but it's worth mentioning. It's called the 95% rule. In the 95% rule, there's no cap on the number and there's no cap on the value of the properties. But for it to be a valid exchange, they need to acquire 95% of the identified value form. So it has the effect of basically you have to acquire everything that's on there, and that one doesn't get used very often, but it does have times where there's a special thing.
It sounds like it's very specific cases, and maybe even when it's pre-planned already, when they know what they're going to acquire, and it's all
exactly
okay. Got it. Yeah, no questions. Do you need a purchase and sale contract in place when you identify properties, or are you literally just sending you a list that says these, like the first option, these are the 3 properties that I am identifying?
There's no requirement around them being in contract or
okay.
But it's good practice to do that. It gives you a higher likelihood of success on the purchase. By day 45, you would definitely want to ideally have at least one of those properties in contract and moving along in the process. You don't want to just identify haphazardly and just find something on the market and throw it on the form. Because let's say that 45 days passes and they've identified properties, but they maybe don't have an existing relationship, or they're not in contract, or there's nothing moving along there. In that situation, let's say none of the 3 properties are available, but it's already past their 45-day identification window. The qualified intermediary would then have to hold those funds up and through the 180th day. And then we can send the money back to the taxpayer. So they would have effectively a failed exchange at that point. So they'd still be on the hook for the taxes, but to add insult to injury, we have to actually hold the money for the remainder of that time.
Got it. Absolutely. Okay.
Yes, you want to be very specific. You want to be really, really it does require a lot of planning. You want to be very on top of it and make sure you're in contract if possible. And in a situation where it seems like it might fail, it might be worthwhile to not identify if it's going to fail, because then the money can go back to them after the 45th day passes. So the day 46 or beyond, we can send the money back to them. In either case, if it's a failed exchange, they're on the hook for the taxes.
Got it. Makes sense. A question regarding numbers, the total amount you property could buy financially. So if I were selling $1 million property and my capital gains were $500,000 to make it simple numbers,
sure.
What type of, obviously it had to be another another investment property, but beyond that, how much would you be qualified for? Are you basing it on you have to buy properties that total to $1 million and more at that point, or?
Correct. Yes. For a full deferral, you want to buy something of equal or greater value. So you want to buy at least $1 million. A lot of people utilize the 1031 exchange to maybe move up in property. So let's say you sell for $1 million, you have $500,000 in proceeds, but you can get into a deal where you can put 25% down and get 75% LTV. You could theoretically buy at that point, it'd be $2 million worth of property. You're not capped on how much you buy. If they wanted to put more money into the deal and go up even further, they can do that. And they just want to make sure you reinvest the full amount of proceeds from the sale and then buy equal or greater for the full tax benefit.
Got it. Makes sense. So it's essentially saying that same deal, $1 million sale, $500,000 capital gain. Can they buy something significantly more if they have the funds to cover it? So say it's a $4 million property. Can they roll in the gain into that and then somehow cover the rest, whatever way they're going to cover that?
Absolutely.
Yep. Okay. Good to know. All right. No, cool.
And I skipped the like-kind part. You asked about like-kind.
Yes.
Like-kind is a very broad term. So as long as it's property that's going to be held for investment or for use in business or trade, that's something that can be exchanged into. So we have a lot of times where people will it's a home. It might be a single-family residence, but it's been rented out and it is, in fact, an investment. And they ask, do they have to buy another single-family residence? That's not the case at all. They can go buy multifamily. They can buy a commercial property. They can buy a triple net. As long as it's held for investment, that it is pretty much very open-ended on that like-kind phrase that they use.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. Next question. When it comes to 1031 exchanges, what are some common issues that you see that people kind of run into when trying to do a 1031 exchange?
Well, so like I said, with advanced planning, one thing we come across a lot is different partnership structures or just the way title is held on their sale property. You have to maintain the same taxpayer throughout the exchange. So if it's owned by an entity, the entity ideally is also going to be the one purchasing the replacement. But there are different rules around that, which again, why you need to be talking to your CPA tax advisor, make sure that you're maintaining that same taxpayer through that transaction, or partnership issues when there's multiple people that are involved that want to maybe go their separate ways. That's something that comes up a lot. And again, requires some advanced planning, or there's different strategies to actually execute on those. That's something that comes up a lot. And then also one thing, it's not been as much recently with the market kind of slowing down a little bit, but when it's a very competitive market, we get a lot of concerns around inventory and what they're going to go into for the replacement. So again, that's where we have the conversation around being very diligent on finding replacements and getting out there and shopping early and making offers early on in the process. So that way you give yourself more certainty of close. One thing that's been a good strategy that a lot of clients have utilized is maybe identifying a backup, like a DST, like a Delaware Statutory Trust, as a backup option, because those usually are they're easy to close. It's a quick close, and it's something that's a good backup option if they can't find maybe an ideal property as an initial replacement. So that's something that we've encouraged in situations where they're concerned about inventory and maybe not finding something and they're worried about failing their exchange.
Got it. Yeah, you touched a good topic there. So DST, I'll let you use the full name of it, but is it like a fund that they can invest into, and basically it's like a bridge until they maybe want to identify at another point in 1031 later on in the future?
So no, it's not a fund. Delaware Statutory Trust is a fractional ownership of a larger property. Usually it's like an institutional grade property, so they can buy into a 500 unit apartment building somewhere that's part of a DST, and it's structured in a way that allows it to be exchangeable and would qualify for a 1031 exchange. So it has a lot of different investors, but it would allow them to do the exchange, and it's not something where they just hold the money in the interim. Basically, a DST has a sponsor that manages and operates the property, and at some point within the life cycle of that, it will sell, so they'll have an opportunity to exchange again. So if they do it as like just to kind of preserve the equity and save the tax, it's really just a holding period for them at that point. By the time they sell, if they want to go back into more traditional real estate, they have that opportunity, but they've been able to defer the taxes. So it's a good strategy. We work with a lot of different DST brokers, and it's become a lot more popular recently. So it's something we talk about a lot because it's a good in between.
If you can identify.
Yeah.
Got it. Very nice. So it's similar to investing in a syndication per se, that I guess to a degree.
Yeah, it's similar to that. It's similar to like a REIT, except it's structured in a way that actually allows it to be qualified for a 1031 exchange. So it's
Understood.
Because typically syndications wouldn't work for an exchange. There's different structures that do work and do not, and Delaware Statutory Trust is one that works. So that's why we talk about them quite often.
Got it. Okay, no, cool. So honestly, that covers a lot. And I mean, my question, it seems like a pretty straightforward process. My last question I had, which you kind of already answered, is, if someone wants to prepare for 1031, how can you prepare? But you already talked about that. And a lot of it is basically preparing. It's calling the right individuals to your tax person, you guys, their financial advisor, their partners, and having a discussion about what the plan is going to be before we initiate this, so they know the deadlines, the timelines, and who to call and what options they have, such as investing in a DST if things don't go as planned and whatnot, or what the implications are if they do just decide to pay the tax. So it's really like all that planning before you kind of get started. So it's kind of what I gathered.
You want to have a very clear picture of it ahead of time, And one thing I heard too with someone, I forget exactly what they said. It was something to the effect of having your exit strategy when you're going into a purchase, if you're going into an investment with people, planning the exit as well, going into it knowing what the exit's going to look like, because a lot of times those things will happen and people want to split off. If they wait till the final moment or there's not the advanced planning there, then they can end up in a situation where the exchange isn't an option, depending on how it's structured. So it's something that they really want to be in touch with those professionals early on in the process and plan ahead for the exit as well.
Got it. No, absolutely. All right, we're going to start to wrap up here. Those are all the 1031 questions. Super informative, and it seems like it's a pretty straightforward process. It's just a bit of planning and planning. So we're jumping outside of the 1031 questions. When you're not helping others with 1031 exchanges, some things you do personally, and what do you enjoy doing?
I like going to trying different restaurants around town here. We got a lot of good spots in San Diego. Like to try and be outside when I can. I play music a little bit, play guitar. So that's nice. Always fun. And I like to travel and get out when I can. But I'm in San Diego, so it feels like it's a vacation anyway. So I don't travel as much as I would like to.
The travel is down to the beach and back, and it's all good.
Exactly.
All right, cool. And so how can people find you, get a hold of you, or what's the best way to contact you?
Well, our website's APX1031.com. That's easy enough. So that's got our contact information on there. They can find me on LinkedIn, just Jake Schiro. And then the phone number will get them there. The 800 number, if they select the option for sales, it'll ring to me. So they can get directly to me from there. Yeah,
no, absolutely. Any final words for the audience before we take off?
Plan ahead. If you want to do it, as much planning as you can do, because the 1031's for long-term capital gains. So there's holding time and things that they want to take into account. So you want to plan ahead and talk to the professionals, make sure you're well advised when going into it and when looking to do a 1031. And also the 1031, it's something that can help build generational wealth. So it's definitely something worth looking into if you are investing in real estate.
Absolutely. All right. So everyone, Jake, thank you so much for jumping on with me and kind of educating the audience on 1031 and kind of enlightening them. To our audience, thank you once again for joining us for another episode of The Agent Investor. I am Brandon Rush. You can find me at www.brandonrushagent.com. You'll find all my contact info there. I wish you all the best in health and happiness. Once again, thank you, Jake. Thank you, everyone, for watching. And until next time, we'll see you then. Thank you.